history of Indian economy. First, first of all, we have to know what we have to read. You have been given, according to the syllabus, 8 credits, and the course, provides an overall understanding of the pattern and growth of Indian economy through the ages. The course is on, emergence, continuity, and changes in the economic structures from the earliest times to the modern period. The history of India is divided into 3 parts. One is ancient Indian history, and another is medieval history, and another is modern period. Each block has been arranged in such a systematic manner that you can have an idea how the Indian economic structure emerged, continued, and the changes took place according to the passage of time. First of all, we have to know what we have to read in the first block. The first block tells about the historiography. It has been accompanied with a discussion on Indian environment, and if we go to the second and third block, we can see it has analyzed the transition of early hunting gathering society to settled agriculture. From the earliest times, how the man was living, and how now we are in the 21st century, and how the human civilization has been developing since the time immemorial. We have to take it into account in the second and third block. And it also, my dear students, takes into account an emergence and growth of cities and empires. I think you understand what is cities and what is empires. Then let's come to the fourth block. Fourth block, it has discussed the transition from ancient to medieval and the growth of expansion of a medieval economy is the central theme of the block. 4 and 5. Also, if we go through the details, we can have the idea about it. The question is, students, medieval economy achieved a high level of monetization, agriculture. In medieval times, agriculture was highly commercialized. New technologies were introduced during that time. And we can go to the block 6, 7, 8. It has given importance on the growth of Indian economy during the colonial period. I mean to say, they throw light how the equation changed with the entry of the Europeans, and how the meaning and character of a various resource use changed under the British rule. My student, you are just doing your post-graduation in history. From 1757 to 15th August 1947, Britishers ruled India, or about a period of 200 years. I mean the day you became the citizens of India. And you should have definitely an idea that how the Britishers were responsible for the disruption of the traditional economic structure of this country. I mean to say, India is a land of villages. Ours is a sufficient village economy. And the whole economic structure started changing during the British period. And particularly Block 7, it focuses on the working of the peasant, I mean the farmers, tribal, and forest economies under the colonial rule. And the major issues built in Block 8, very interesting, students, whether the Indian strategies suffered at the hands of the British? Question mark. Yes. Britishers were held responsible for the economic exploitation of the country in general. Next importance is whether the deindustrialization occurred during the British period. That we have to also take into account and we have to discuss. To what extent did Indian craft production, I mean to say, survive under the colonial rule? And another important thing also we have to discuss, what are the pattern of industrialization in the 20th century? And overall, your course ends with a discussion on transition from planned economy to globalization. Then we have to discuss about the Block 1 because it's counseling. We cannot read in details. I'll just give you the overall idea about the different blocks. So, my dear students, before discussing the contemporary ideas on ancient Indian economic history, it is very much necessary to briefly to give importance on economic ideas inherent in our sources. Because, Arthashastra, which has been written by Kautilya, in Arthashastra, the section dealing with the settlement of villages, Janapada, where the people stay, brings out the importance of rural settlements and agriculture. For your kind information, if you analyze the civilizations of the world, you will be definitely coming to the conclusion that there is no civilization in the world which has been established without having a river side. Each and every civilization is born and brought up just beside the river. So agriculture is the most vital factor that is to be taken into account for the revenue of the every state. And then if you come to the post-Mauryan period, post-Mauryan means you should have an idea. Ashoka Maurya, Chandragupta Maurya. There was a Maurya dynasty in India, ruled in India. And the recorded history of ancient India started from the Gupta period. Post-Mauryan text, what does it provide? Information about a large number of occupations. Occupations, you understand, and workers. And with implications of craft production and specialization and trade. It just happens at the time of the, my dear students, in the post-Mauryan period. And the whole concept, if you take into account, you will know. Similarly, for suppose there are references to the address of the grants are also possible for rural eco society. You must have read about inscriptions. Inscriptions also provide information different types of settlements and their constituents, indicating differentiation and immense variety rather than all of them being alike. Because whatever you are reading, we have got different sources. We are analyzing the sources. It has been written by the historians, and we are going through it. Then you have to take into account the concept given by the new historiography. I mean to say, the new historiography, which became the dominant historiography through the 1960s and 70s, well, emphasize technological and economic changes and their significance. With the passage of time, we became developed from the point of view of science and technology. And in this way, now we are in the 21st century. And in this way, the transformation from ancient to medieval is marked by a gradual integration of economies into what there is a historian. I just forgot his name. I remember that is Wallerstein calls an economic world system. Muslims ruled India around a period of 500 years. From the Arab invasion of Sin to the decline of the Mughal Empire, there is Islam. And Islam rose during the medieval period. And the rise of Islam can be seen as the first major break in this context. Next, my dear students, the next turning point was the discovery of America in 1492. That what did it do? That broke the isolation of the Western Hemisphere, and the arrival of Vasco da Gama in Calicut in 1498, which heralded the beginning of European penetration of Asian nations. 6 Europeans came to India as a mere trading company. Portuguese, Danes, Dutch, Dutch, French, and English. And none but the British could be able to establish an empire in India that we call the British Empire of India. And the Britishers were held responsible for controlling each and every system of the country and establishing the British Raj that continued about a period of 200 years, from 1757 Battle of Plassey to 15th August 1947, the day we became the citizens of free India. The most important thing is the Britishers were held responsible for the destruction, disruption, devastation, whatever negative adjective you can use, responsible of the country. Next comes, my dear students, the rise of the class. The rise of a dominant class of rent collecting landlords. Dekho, try to understand. Students, you must have villages. You must find in a village there is a gentleman who has got a lot of landed property. and there are people, those who do not have a house to stay in. And a servile peasantry, suffering numerous constraints, finally manifested itself in violent agrarian conflicts and rural revolts. What happens? The bloody Jamidars during the British period became intermediary between British and the common people. And The most important thing you have to keep in mind, my dear students, expansion of the transition to the early medieval phase have shifted from the decline of long distance and maritime trade to decline of towns and even a social crisis. Of course, historians differ in their treatment of the post-Gupta centuries, while some characterize the 11th, 12th centuries around as a categorically distinct phase compared to the 7th and 10th centuries, which were marked by economic decline. Others look at growth in the rural economy within the early feudal context. And in the end, with long-term consequences for markets, merchants, trade, and towns. Next, another important thing we have to keep it in mind and we have to discuss it and we have to analyze. The idea of a general decline as given within the Dominions historiography for early medieval India, notwithstanding the acknowledgement of agrarian expansion in certain regions during the same period. Of course, it has been questioned in recent years. So, one thing, my dear students, you have to keep in mind that how the Indian economy grew according to the passage of time from the ancient period to the medieval period, so that now we are in 21st century with economic growth. Another interesting thing you have to discuss. You know, students, the Britishers ruled India for about a period of 200 years. And we fought an independence struggle against them. And India became independent. But students, let's have a critical analysis. The Muslims also ruled India. Arab invasion of Sindh, that is what is called Qutbuddin Aibak, Iltutmish, Rajia Sultana, Balban, Khilji imperialism, bloody Muhammad bin Tughlaq, and all those people came and they also established a dynasty in India, and that is called slave dynasty. They sat on the throne of the Delhi and called them sultans. They ruled about a period of 540 years. Then you know the first battle of Panipat, 1526. It was one of the most important battles in the history of India because it established the Mughal Empire in India. And the Mughals ruled India for a period of 200 years. From Babur, who is the founder of the Mughal Empire, and Aurangzeb, who was held responsible for the decline of the Mughal Empire. Students, try to understand. Did we fight any independent struggle against the Muslims? Certainly not. We never fought. The Muslims ruled India, the Britishers ruled India. The Muslims are foreigners and the British are foreigners. Babur, you know, he was a bloody shepherd. He tried his luck in India and defeated Ibrahim Lodi in the first battle of Panipat and established an empire, and we call Mughal Empire, and a dynasty, that is Mughal dynasty. Our country is to pray to the bloody in India. Saka, Kusana, they also invaded India. So, what is to discuss? How the Indian economy suffered from the time memorial, and now, you know, India is going to lead the developing countries of the world in the coming years. So, students, you will be confused. The economists of the world are confused how India runs, but India runs. So the country which has been ruled by Mughals, Muslims, Britishers, it is equal. It's to be coming and it is obvious and it is clear that we have been not only socially, economically, religiously, politically, administratively, from each and every context we have been exploited by the people because they ruled us. Next important thing you have to students keep in mind, what were the new emerging trends in historiography during 1960s? You must have known about Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, Indus Valley civilization. Once had a flower or a bedroom or that urban centers happened to coincide in the middle of the first.
Sir, audio is not sir, you are not
Hello.
audible.
তাহলে what to do?
Network issue. Network issue.
মানে network problem. Is it audible here?
Yes, yes, now.
Uh-huh. Well, sometimes there is a network problem here. What to do? That has been a case since the time of bloody lockdown. I've been taking online classes. Many problems students are
Yes,
having.
sir.
So, my dear students, I think you understand what I'm telling. Hello,
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
hello.
Yes, sir.
Please, please, if you have any problem, because I've been counseling since last 10 years. I am a lecturer. First of all, I have not introduced to you people that I have been working in Paradip Port College, and is Santosh Mishra, and that is that. So, so come to the point. With the illumination of the wide-ranging economic activity in the post-British mind, students, audible. Yeah. हेलो बंद कर दीजिए इज इट ऑडिबल यार
Yes, sir.
हेलो
Yes.
हाँ so next माने the post-modern centuries to comparative decline of stagnation in the Gupta period of the golden age of the Guptas received a setback, and the Guptas lost some of their luster. You know, in ancient India, the Gupta age is regarded golden age. Golden age means there must be a sound political strategies. People must be socially stable, People must be religiously tolerant. So many things are taken into account. But the most important thing is people must be economically developed to such an extent that they should not have any tension regarding their food, shelter, and clothing. Conventionally, the Mauryan economy deriving from the Arthashastra has been characterized in terms of centralized state control over all sections of economy. Try to understand. If a centralized state controls the all sector of economy, what will be the consequences? The shift from dynastic to economic history made common people visible, and instead of a kings and dynasties, it invested them with agency. You know, ours is a democratic country. My dear students, you all know it or not? The what do you mean by democracy? The government is of normal. In a general sense, I am telling the government is of the people, by the people, for the people. And ours is one of the biggest democratic country of the world. What does the preamble of the Indian Constitution speaks? Sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. And you know, Part 3 of the Indian Constitution guarantees the fundamental rights of citizens of India, and Part 4 of the Indian Constitution guarantees the directive principle of state policy. Ours is a welfare state. So our history speaks that king, subjects, ruler, ruled, administrator, administered. A king must look into the interest of its subjects. If not, it cannot be taken as a welfare state. So India, our culture, Indian culture, tradition, heritage, whatever, if you analyze, you will find out ours has been a welfare state in the true sense of the term. But that was not made possible only because of the different empires in India. Students, if you read the modern period, modern Indian history, we read a British Empire of India. Interesting, देखो. If you look to the medieval history, Mughal Empire in India. Again go back, Muslim rule in India. How many princely states, princely kings were there in India? That is Harshavardhana, Ashoka Maurya, Chandragupta Maurya, very few. So how our culture, even culture, not only economy, but also culture started having a transition from one point to other each and every time if you take into account. Then, my dear students, you know, the nationalist interpretation we have to discuss. What is the historiography of the colonial economy of India by giving attention on nationalist view of Marxist. The nationalist interpretation, I mean to say, which emerged in the 19th century as you can call it a critique of colonial or imperialist constructions of a stagnant, unchanging East. It is mainly connected with establishing the pan-Indian unified nature of the medieval Indian economy, flourishing under the three cornered stimuli of political stability provided by the medieval Indian, particularly the Mughal state, the rich natural resources of the country, and the productivity of the Indian producers. This country belongs to the Indians. The sky is ours. The air is ours. what happened in the British period? Laws are to be made in the British Parliament. It is to be carried out on the soil of India. Now, we are having our own government, own country, our setup. But what happened at that time? The laws will be passed in the British Parliament. It will be carried out on the soil of India. And you know, Aurangzeb, who was held responsible for the decline of the Mughal Empire in India, he really wanted to convert India a land of Islam. What to talk about the British people, the Christian missionaries, even in today also, they are mobilizing people that there is one religion exists in the world, that is Christianity. It is also, students, it is also influenced the Indian economy to a greater extent, but it is not there in your course. Then if we discuss about the Marxist historiography, Marxist, you know, which has reached considerable fineness and depth in the last 50 odd years, I mean to say, does not speak with one voice in its interpretation of the medieval economy. Of course, there are some whose views border very closely to the nationalist position. And these are the two approaches, nationalist and the historiography. Then another important thing, the students, you have to keep in mind, I mean to say, in other words, while the nationalist vision of the medieval Indian economy is growth in the midst of the stable equilibrium, one influential variant of the Marxist framework sees it more as a fractured proceeds. So, what do you get? The fruits of economic growth were unevenly distributed among a parasitical ruling class in the form of revenue assignments. Because, you know, being India is a land of villages and ours is a self-sufficient village economy, we completely depended on agriculture during that time. This thing you have to keep in mind. Another point, remember, despite the major differences in the way of nationalist and Marxist historiographies have interpreted the dynamics of the medieval economy, there are certain areas where they share certain commonly grounded assumptions. Because in a country, the approach may be different, but the resource is the same. So it is but natural. They have to keep something in mind which is common. Then, mind the students, it's also a difficult paper, but a little bit understanding will make you write better than anybody else. I'll also tell you how to secure beautiful marks. I'll definitely tell you in the coming classes. Another important thing I have to discuss, the new emerging trends. We have to study the new emerging trends of the medieval economy. Students, analyses of the medieval Indian economy have also been significantly reoriented in the recent past by using inputs from social anthropology and by broadening the concept of economic exchanges as involving a whole set of micro transactions of a social and cultural nature. You know, any society, any culture, It must be developed. It must have a definite outlook only because a stable economic process continues or it is being backed up. Another important thing, the important input has led to many historians, particularly those studying the histories of South India. Especially, let's go to the South India and Western India, South and Western India, emphasizing the formation and role of community institutions in the economy and their eventual dissolution. It was broken of transformation and the midst of the Marco level economic changes. It is all views, nationalist views and Marxist views. Another thing, my dear students, then we have to come to the production, because whatever we are having, we have to give importance on production. Production, production responded to shifting market and price conjunctures, and this has been shown to have occurred in commodities as diverse as cotton. You mean the cotton in Western India and rice in Bengal. That's all. Try to look into. Suppose I'm just telling you a bit advance. British. It monopolized some of the raw materials in India. It took them to its own country and made finished products and wrote over the material made in India and sold it in the international market. But whose raw material it has taken? The raw materials of our country. And we purchased it giving money from our own pocket. But the whole process is done by our money. So, from this, the move into the question of a market and a marketization is a natural one. And there is for example, in the first instance, let's give an instance, a growing rethinking on the nature of the relation of product or in the economy. Because how economy will grow? If you have got products, you have to sell them in the market. And the markets and marketization, it is but natural for any product are to be made. The most important thing, my dear students, you listen. There is surprising unanimity of opinion that the economy of South Asia witnessed the exponential increase in the volume and velocity of money transaction in these countries. How? The monetization was a result of greater, systemization of tax gathering apparatus of the medieval state and its increasing prosperity to collect revenue in cash. Because when the Muslims or the Mughals ruled India, what was the source of income of this country? Agriculture. They started exploiting and collecting taxes. You must have read in medieval history how many taxes were levied upon Indians by Aurangzeb. Then comes, just I'm throwing some light on that way, what you call it, revisionist approach for the study of, pre-colonial economy. Just give a patient hearing to my words. The revisionist viewpoint disagrees with the critics, the more dominant historiographical schools on these specific counts. Number one, if you have papers, you can write the first. First is it's disagreement with the effectiveness of the centralized state in medieval India. And the centralized economy was there. They disagree how it was effective. The second is area of agreement is over the disagreement over the dynamics of the commercial processes in medieval India. How commercialism continued. The third point of difference is that the so-called parasitism of a merchant capital, because there is a class, merchant class, they were capitalist at that time. And most importantly, the argument about the parasitic nature of commercial life in medieval India has also been effectively undermined by historians exploring the nature of the maritime trade in India, particularly in the 17th and 18th century, where the maritime trade developed in the Indian context. Very important thing now I am telling you. Just keep in mind, if you go through your books, you can have a complete idea about it. Students, significant also has been the newly emerging emphasis in historical reconstruction of the medieval economy on the role of the merchants and traders in the intermediate layers of the Indian economy. You know, ruler and a ruled, but the man in between is called intermediary. What you call it? Odiyare madhyasthi. So they started living a very, very pleasant life, taking the public money, I mean the government's money, and enjoyed life to a great extent. Another important thing, what is the colonial viewpoint? Colony means British established a colony in India, and British colonialism was not only in India but also in America. You know, American War of Independence in 1776, which was one of the greatest and the important event in the history of the world. And British established 13 colonies in the United States of America, and England was the unrivaled mistress of the 13 colonies of the United States of America. I mean to say, there was a religious reformation in Europe in the 14th, 15th century. And some people doubted the existence of Almighty in Jesus Christ. They protested that Jesus is not God. Jesus is not God. So James III, the King of England, ousted them from the country. And interestingly, Columbus discovered America during that time. Mayflower, the name of the ship sails on the sea and reached America. And as British was controlling India, sitting there in England, so also sitting in England, they also control the United States of America. So the colonial viewpoint is the men who ruled India and the colonial scholars who assessed that rule were, I mean to say, at a great pains to emphasize that the advent of British rule had brought peace and good government to the subcontinent. You must have heard from the old people in a village. Now things are not going on well. British was right. It's because of the fact, my dear students, the railway network, irrigation system introduced with the British, modern economy, I mean to say Western science, education, self-government, all these things the credit goes. Another important thing you have to keep in mind. British constitution in the first constitution in the world that guaranteed the equal rights of men and women. And you know, England is regarded as the mother of the democratic constitutions of the world. So hypocrites, British race. In its country, they are talking about democracy. But when they came to India, they talked about imperialism. Each and every step taken by the British Indian administration that it was guided by imperialistic considerations and imperialistic designs. In their country, democratic. In our country, imperialistic. What does it mean? So, my dear students, another important thing you have to keep in mind, very interesting concept, and that is, what is commercialization of agriculture? There was, I meant to say, commercialization of agriculture even in the pre-colonial period, but it grew enormously during the colonial period because Indian economy, by Indian agriculture, commercialization of agriculture, it was there. Even it was before pre-colonial era, but it grew enormously, seriously during the colonial period. And the nationalists and the Marxists have also argued that the need to pay high land revenue in cash also created pressure on the peasantry, I mean the farmers community, to produce crops for sale. You know, there was a Governor General in India whose name was Cornwallis. The British introduced, I mean he was a British, the British introduced the permanent settlement in Bengal in 1793 in order to encourage the development of agriculture on capitalist lines. So the early nationalists, they argued that high land revenue demand, the timing of the payment of the revenue installments, I mean to say, and the growing production of cash crops created for the peasant a compulsion to borrow. That's why money lenders came into account. They gave people money on interest and exploited people like anything. So, ultimately, the result of various factors like production of cash crops for the market, the what you call rent revenue credit squeeze, environmental degradation, and natural factors like rainfall levels led to frequent famines in a 19th century India. And of course, the incidence declined during the 20th century. And another important thing you just remember, my students, I am giving it's a counseling class. At times I am coming to the details. What do you mean by deindustrialization? In the early left nationalist assessments, we can find of the decline of the traditional artisanal industries in India, and it was argued, that manufactured imports led to a significant decline in the number of people engaged in the secondary sector and the growth of landless agricultural labor. And for your kind information, in 1968, I forgot his name, Morris, another what is there, you get it collected from the book, argued that the discussion of deindustrialization was a uninformed, not uninformed by economic theory. And the most interesting thing is, what was the state of Indian economy on the eve of British conquest? I mean to say, you must have heard the name Dada Bhai Naroji, the theory of drain of wealth. Just keep in mind. The theory of drain is, however, associated with Dada Bhai Naroji, who estimated that by the 19th century, students remember, 1500 million pounds had been taken away in the form of a drain. Students think, he argued in his book Poverty and Non-British Rule in India that the country was impoverished because of this drain, and the capital that Britain invested in the country was a small part of the money that Britain had taken out earlier. Theory of drain of wealth means the wealth from India was drained to England. And another important thing, liberal and non. Let's talk about the liberal and non-liberal economists and historians. They have supported that special importance was the argument about the unequated.
Sir, during the time opium trade between British and China, that time, sir.
It's a different part, because the time is becoming, but I have to complete. And if we start discussing, it will continue. We can have the discussion in the next class, if you like, in the after tomorrow, of course. But now we are important on them, because I have to complete some other topics. And most important thing, we'll discuss in the next class. But let me finish the first credit, the first block. What are the conditions of women in the colonial economy? You have to keep. I'll take another 5 to 10 minutes. Students, please, because at times I go to the detailed discussion, because I know this is not a classroom teaching, it is an online class. And another important thing, it is also a counseling. I'm telling, just let me finish, and if we have time, we can discuss in the next period. The role of women, in the traditional industry of India, has been the subject of study for quite some time, because the role of the women in spinning, basket weaving, rope making, pottery, etc., all has been the subject of mainstream economic history as well. And the role of women spinners in the 19th century, and the classification of female workers in the census of India reported, formed a part of the debate on the deindustrialization. And another important thing, we have to discuss, to what extent did the geographical regions determine the agriculture map of India, and that is, students, to analyze the history of social power in agriculture. And it's a, what you can call it, articulation with the states and environment. We can look for these first activities that constitute agriculture and re-scattered across agrarian space. Just you have to keep in mind. And another vital point, knowledge is a critical element in framing and bringing the other elements together in the organization of agriculture. Because text depicts territories of social power. Ideas moving among farmers create territories of knowledge. So, finally, come to the mythologies and sacred, geographies define the agrarian, you can call it space, because no farming population has ever believed that activity on the farm itself is sufficient for success in farming. And agriculture in this way involves the exertion of powers of control over many moving elements, including exotic knowledge, supernatural beings, human migrations. Next comes prices, labor on the land. Control over the means of production is, in this way, no simple function of property rights, caste, or class structure. And ultimately, just you must have an idea. Still, I have to tell what was the relationship between changing season and crop. I mean to say, South Asia students occupies a transition zone between arid Southwest Asia and humid Southeast Asia. If one travel east from the high day Suleiman slopes across the arid Peshawar Valley, जोटा कौच तुम salt range, Punjab and Indus Valley, and then east down the increasingly humid Gangetic plain to the double delta of the Ganga and what is the name of the river? Brahmaputra rivers, and from arid lands dotted by field of wheat and millet to a vast flat land of watery paddy and fish farms. So, crops move off the land most profusely during the second and third months of each monsoon, and the biggest harvest till September, December. Regional differences appear, I mean to say, most dramatically at harvest time. For example, the northeast with its rainfall has three harvest seasons. The Rabi season covers March, April, and May, and yields mostly rice, but in Bihar also wheat, barley, and pulses. And these are the things you have to keep in mind. And August, September, and all the. Also, I'm telling. Suppose what to tell. Suppose in Bihar and Chhattisgarh, in addition to rice, and arrive in August, September, the season becomes different. And last but not the least, will definitely come to conclusion. What do you mean? How do you understand by trade winds? And with this, I'll end the class up within 2 to 3 minutes. The trade winds, students, also we call it trades, are the prevailing pattern of easterly surface winds found in the tropics within the lower portion of the Earth's atmosphere, in the lower section of the troposphere near the Earth's equator. So, ultimately, the surface air that flows from these subtropical high pressure belts towards the equator is deflected, toward the west in both hemispheres by the, that is what effect I forgot, Coriolis effect. I remember, I just forgot. So, lastly, my dear students, general distribution of air masses near the country, and I think the first block and the first credit is completed. So, what you are asking, my student? Opium Hello.
Sir.
Yes, sir.
What 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 were asking?
Sir,
ଆଜ୍ଞା
actually,
କହିଲି
I,
ଭାଇ ମୁଁ ଟିକେ ଆଜି ବହୁତ କଣ୍ଟିନ୍ୟୁଅସ୍ ଗୋଟେ ଘଣ୍ଟା ଧରି କହୁଛି ବୁଝିଲ କି?
sir,
Sir.
ଆମେ ୱିଲ୍ ଡିସ୍କସ୍ ଆବାଉଟ୍ ଡେପ୍ଥ ଟୁମରୋ ହବ ହବ
yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Sir, sir, if possible, so next class will make notes, sir. Accordingly, will prepare for exam.
okay wonderful I'll teach in detail without any problem. I am thorough on the subject. Whatever paper given by certificate college, that will be taught with competence and conviction. And I will also tell you how to face good marks. ଆଜି କେତେ ପିଲା ଅଛନ୍ତି କି?
21.
25 4 sir.
At the next class, if he before if it is possible, we can introduce ourselves with each other. ହେଲା
Yes,
Yes
sir.
sir.
ରହିଲି.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank
ଯୋଉମାନେ ହ୍ୱାଟ୍ସଆପ ଗ୍ରୁପରେ ଜଏନ୍ ନାହଁ ତ ସେମାନେ ନମ୍ବର ଏଥିରେ ମେସେଜ କର।
Okay.
Number दे दियो विकास भाई. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Hello?
ହ୍ୟାଲୋ
Hello?
ହଁ କୁହନ୍ତୁ।
Hello?
ହଁ ହ୍ୟାଲୋ
Hello?
ହଁ ହ୍ୟାଲୋ Nine three four eight 647 630